Pearson Rabbit's story begins with Dr. Stephanie Pearson, a passionate OBGYN at the height of her career. When a shoulder injury struck during a precipitous delivery, her dreams were shattered, leaving her unable to practice medicine. Determined to make a difference, Stephanie became an advocate for her peers, guiding them through the complex disability process. Alongside insurance expert Scott Ravitz, Stephanie founded Pearson Ravitz, a company determined to approach insurance differently. Together, they set their mission to educate and empower physicians to protect their most valuable asset, their income, and the most important people in their life, their family. Today, Pearson Ravitz serves the medical community in all 50 states. At Pearson Ravitz, they understand the unique concerns of physicians. Physician-founded and physician-focused, Pearson Ravitz builds human connections before they create quotes. Life can change in an instant. It's hard to imagine that a sudden illness or injury could leave you and your family in a devastating financial situation. But with a little planning and guidance, you can prepare for every possibility. Visit PearsonRavitz.com today to schedule your consultation with a Pearson Ravitz advisor.
Finally, a source of raw, real, and honest information on healthcare issues that matter most. Welcome to BS Free MD. From the latest medical information to how to stay sane as a doctor or a patient, no subject is taboo, no BS is allowed. Now, let's welcome your hosts, Doctors May and Tim Hindmarsh.
Welcome back. We're super excited. We will be having a conversation that maybe gets split into 2 episodes. I'm not sure, because we always love to talk to our favorite friends and marital coaches, Dr. Jeep and Vanessa Naum. Like I said, longtime marital coaches, authors of a great book, Best Friends Again, and super fun just to chat with and discuss everything, including sex, marriage, and everything in between. So welcome back to BS Free MD. I was looking, it was like episode 64, a year and a half
ago.
On,
what are we on now? Like 162?
Yeah.
A year and a half? No.
Well, you were on a live Doc Tales with cocktails.
Yeah, but that was still over a year ago.
And I still, yes. So it's just
exactly
right. So thanks for coming back on the show. This is going to be fun. Oh, yes. And it's, the listeners don't know, but we're kind of living parallel lives on opposite coasts right now, because you're in the process, just like we are, trying to, I think downsize, but sell your home, kids, life, everything. And so it's just kind of not fun to go through that together, but at least to have someone else to bounce off our struggles together with.
Shared misery is half the misery.
Definitely.
Yes, I wrote that. Our newsletter comes out once a week, and it came out yesterday. And that was the topic of the week for me, was just about our friendships, how much we'll miss them. But the whole point of having great, deep friendships is to share joys, but shared sorrow together. So it does make it easier to go through. So it's fun. It's helpful and great to have friends like you guys too, just to bounce things off of like that. So anyway, today I'm super excited for us to kind of, throw around a few topics on marriage. And we get a lot of questions from our listeners. I'm thinking of friends that have young kids. I call them young kids, adult children getting married now. And so I want to talk on a few topics. The first one being, I guess, with all the coaching that you have done over the years and still currently, what would be, the top 5-6 points and issues that you see that couples bring to the table when they come to you?
Well, before we get to that, you asked a very good question about younger ones getting ready to tie the knot. A thing that we see is, not only with healthcare professionals, but really married people in general, is there's really not enough time, anyway, spent prior to engagement, during engagement, talking about really substantive issues. And if you don't talk about substantive issues, or you think that a problem that you have, that it'll be fine once you put the rings on, this is crazy. It's just not the case.
I'll give you a perfect example. We kind of fell into that trap, and one was he wanted to have more kids than me, and I wanted one child. He wanted more than one, and we kicked the can down the road. And I mean, technically, it was a deal breaker. It really was. How we got around it, of course, was I agreed to have more kids and, carried some resentment over that. And it doesn't need to be that way. The bottom line is that if your differences are deal breakers, realize that after the honeymoon period is over, after the limerence stage is over, after the, oh my God, I love him so much, and how you feel the day you get married is going to last your lifetime, which is wrong. After those feelings are over, reality hits you in the face, and your differences are noticeable.
And that, the differences in particular, once the rubber hits the road and real life hits you in the face, and day-to-day living, job, when all that hits, then it's even more difficult to deal with something that would have been better taken care of before you get married. But it's pervasive. I mean, couples, and as we've said, we coach primarily healthcare professionals, physicians mostly, and we have a couple right now. They've been married for a long time, and we're going through things with them that they just kind of let go for years, and kind of started falling into this trap of leading separate lives. So these kind of discussions, even this far out into their relationship, weren't had all these years ago. And it's
right. And I think it's an excellent point. And I've said this, I don't know how many times, and my friend will eventually listen to this episode and he'll know exactly what it is. But I mean, my father basically trained me. He's like, you get a checklist, because it's practical things that make your relationship, and it's practical things that destroy it. Like all the romance and all that, that's great. But that's like the sprinkles on the ice cream. That's not the milk from the cow. And so to really make that ice cream sundae amazing and have the sprinkles really mean something, you really want pasteurized milk to start with. You don't want salmonella very badly.
Salmonella.
and so it's the practical stuff. And some of it doesn't matter to other people, but if it matters to you. And like my one friend, the absolute game breaker was fitness. He's super into fitness. He was going to be into fitness until he is either dead or disabled. So I told him, I said, yes.
Yeah.
He's like, well, am I being shallow? I said, you're not being anything. I said, if that's really important to you, it's really important to you, because you're going to spend way, way more time together growing your relationship, hiking and going to the gym and doing all these things together, if you marry somebody that's into those things at the same time as you. Whereas if it's just philosophy and all those things are still important, but it's the practical stuff. It's how you spend money. It's how many kids you want. It's what you do for recreation. It's how many vacations are you going to take? Like, people don't think of this stuff, but that is absolutely 100% the game-changing stuff.
True. Or you do what I did, which was the complete opposite, and there was no list. It was, well, whatever is incomplete in me will be made complete by my Prince Charming, and he will fix all problems.
Yeah, but you married a man, which means you married a creature whose goal in life is to rip his underwear off and throw it into the hamper with one foot.
Anyway.
Yes, I complete you.
So we won't go into all the details of how that evolved and how it took me forever to, figure out my own wants and needs and who I was. And that, you were just the turn into the pumpkin at midnight kind of prince. No, I'm kidding. So basically, yes, it's talking about the issues while you're in the dating, courting phase first is key. And if you guys can get to them first, then you wouldn't have a job helping coach through the mess later on. So, all right, let's then pretend in an ideal world we're coming to you, or you're coaching an engaged couple, or seriously dating. What would you say? Okay, what have you talked through these issues? These are going to be the top ones you're going to struggle with. They're going to cause probably conflict somewhere up down the road. Here they are.
Well, if you're, for instance, like we were, I was in training. Vanessa was, non-medical, at least at that time, until I went into practice, and then she ran my office. But there was just, we talked about it, but it was something, again, that we really should have been given more thought. And I was training in an area just outside of Pittsburgh called Beaver, Pennsylvania. Beaver Falls, some areas around there, just like boroughs of Pittsburgh. And a great experience in training. Really, really liked it. But I always had this dream of, which absolutely did not match reality when we did end up moving back. But
nightmare.
Yeah, it was a nightmare. But the point I'm trying to make is, especially those of you who are in training and you're getting married, or you've planned on getting married, have you talked about where each of you wants to live? Is it something? Do you want to live where you're training? Is where you are training is it away from where you're from? What is your desire? Is it you want to go back there? Is it where both of you are from? Do both of you have family roots in separate areas? And is this going to be a obstacle if you go to one? Are both of you going to, if you're going to be happy? And that's huge. And we've had clients where it just kind of got swept under the rug. And usually it's the wife who says, whatever you want to do. But then, with time, bitterness grows, resentment grows, or you're spending time away because you're going visiting a relative for weeks at a time. And it's one of those things that should be talked about. And then kids, like we said, how many kids do you envision having? Is that something that's important? Religion, and it's something that was important to both of us, and a lot of couples these days, it may not matter as much, but it doesn't mean that it still shouldn't be talked about. Finances, what do you envision with your life, say 5-10 years down the road? Do you have a goal? Is it important that you live in a big house? Is belonging to a country club, vacationing, all that other, happy horseshit, all that other crap, but which was never important to us. But unless you talk that stuff out, it could be an obstacle for you. And so that should be talked about. Do you, in regards to family, is there an issue there? You don't only marry each other, but you marry each other's families.
Great.
Is that a significant issue, or is it just something that you could ignore and say, okay, well, she's over there, and we'll put our time in as we have to, but it's really not going to be the kind of an in-law relationship that we would envision. And so we just find that a lot of these topics are glossed over.
I think we need to write another book.
Yes. There you go.
I could write a whole book about your mom.
Yeah.
It brings something very practical to mind, and something that all four of us have been going through to at least some degree in the last several months, if not realistically years, which is people buy a house in a way more practical way than they pick a spouse. And trust me, your spouse can destroy your life in ways far more dramatic than buying the wrong place to live. But it's like, okay, the kitchen has to be this big, and the outdoor area has to have X, Y, and Z. The house has to be this big. It has to have this many garage spots, whatever. Like, it's really easy to define those things for most people. And, when May and I built our, forever home, and now as we're buying another house, I defer most of the actual interior stuff to her. And then I have veto power on a few things. It's like, that I hate. Don't do that. Everything else I can live with. All I care about is the garage. And so it's pretty simple. But so I really want the listeners to get in their mind, it's the same thing. Just because it's a relationship doesn't mean there's some special magic sauce. It's just as practical. And that's really, really important, because you may be physically attracted to somebody for a whole bunch of reasons, right, wrong, or indifferent, but that will change with time. And so all that practical stuff, as far as personality, as far as religious belief, as far as how you spend money, as far as recreation, because that's a huge deal to me. And that's something May and I are cognitively deciding what we're going to do when we move. Because the danger in a relationship is I'll have 15 hobbies and I'll just leave. So we're going to go, okay, what do we do together? And how do we map that out? And how does that look every day of the week? Because otherwise it doesn't happen.
Right.
Yeah, we talk about planning so much.
That is so huge, Tim. And it's such an important point. And that's like, with a couple that we're talking about now, they have different interests. There's very little similarity in things that they like to do, and it's caused an issue. It really has. And unfortunately, I think in having talked to other people in the past, those kind of issues really never. I don't think they were ever really brought up, and we're bringing it out now. And as it turns out, it's a significant problem, especially when both of you are in the medical field. Both of you are exhausted when you come home, and you have to, you've been to the office, and we both know what it's like to have a career in medicine these days, and all the not so good things that are happening in so many ways. And so you come home, there has to be some similarity there of what you like and want to do. It's not about going to separate areas of the house.
It's about always keeping in mind why you got together to begin with, and why you made the decision to marry for life, and to live your life with intention, like you said, make decisions together like that, instead of one person making a decision, the other person getting upset with that. They really don't know how to communicate with each other. The walls start going up, resentment starts building, the kids come, one of them, I don't mean to be sexist, but I think there's something different between a mother and children versus a man and their children. But and then you've got potentially parenting problems, and you just start stacking different issues on top of one another, and they kind of snowball.
And if you don't have that background, that I like to always say that if the foundation between the two of you is there, in like a house, okay, the foundation is there. This other stuff that's above the foundation, like the furnace, there's this problem or that problem, but the foundation is fine. The rest of this stuff oftentimes can be static and be dealt with, but if the foundation's there and you keep that in mind constantly, you can get over those things. But if there's cracks in the foundation, the rest of this stuff takes an even bigger.
Yeah. So all those talking points that you start off going into the relationship that you need to think about evolve as time goes on. People change, interests change, new jobs come up, struggles, changes in careers. So it's a process that you keep doing throughout your entire marriage. It's not just discuss the big stuff, figure it out, and you're done. So we're telling everybody you would agree, as long as you've been married and we've been married, that it's an ongoing thing.
But the big stuff changes.
No, that's what I was just saying. I hope.
And that's exactly correct. Like, I mean, I was the worst person in the entire world to go on vacation with 25 years ago, because I had to do 16 different sports a day, or else I was like going out of my mind. It's like, lay on the beach. Why you lay on the beach? That's insane. You could be like in the water. You could be under the water. You could be flying an airplane. And so, like literally that's something we had to negotiate, because, and then but it changes. Now I can go to the beach for, 2 or 3 hours and actually like it. It's fun.
So can we kind of, I don't know, go topic by topic, kind of through briefly breaking it down? Like, so to begin with, I loved that you brought up the living, where you're going to live thing, because I think that is probably, in my mind, one of the things that usually gets forgotten about the least, because oftentimes people are in the relationship, they're young, they're in training, they're in college, and don't give it much thought. And you're right, if there's two, not even just in medicine, because I know that's mostly health professionals you coach, but whatever you're doing with, if you're in the military, that's a whole nother ballgame, because you're getting moved around, or if you're in police or those types of things. But if one's, a physician who's training is moving around, or two people with careers, that has to be given some thought. So how do you work that out? Because I'm thinking of actually right now some friends, and they'll listen to this podcast, whose kids are struggling with, they're newly married for a few years, and they thought they were going to be going and living one direction, but now he has a career opportunity, but the young wife has now found that she's got a job she loves and doesn't want to move, and they don't know how to work that out, because they're still at that stage of, if
women stayed home where they were supposed to be, then there wouldn't be a problem, would there?
You mean barefoot and pregnant?
That's how his dad expected me to be.
Oh yeah.
Asshat. That's all I have to say. No, so how do you walk them through even talking about it, or thinking about it, or planning?
That is a really tough one, because ultimately it comes down to a choice, and you have to, one person is going to, there's only going to be one choice. There are two options, but there's only going to be one choice. And so how do you negotiate around that? It takes a lot of talking.
Oh, well, yeah, the thing that supports and buttresses everything is your ability to talk and communicate with each other. And not only to communicate, but communicate in a way that exhibits active listening, understanding, not interrupting, and especially with something this important and potentially life and relationship changing. In a case like that, it would be, okay, how significant is your desire with both of these jobs? Is it, I'm assuming these are in significantly separate areas. There's a distance there. So is there a possibility that that there could be something similar to that job in the other spouse in the area that they're going to? Is it something, can you say, okay, well, I found a job out there. I'm going to take it for a couple of years, see how I like it, or a few years. And if I don't, then I want you to look into coming to this other place where I would like to be. And so it's like the art of compromise. And it's not something that you're going to come to a decision on quickly. It may take several discussions, and to speak openly and honestly about your concerns, your needs, your wants with each of those.
And really do some soul searching to find out,
exactly.
Is it a deal breaker?
Yeah. Because
is this worth my relationship? Do I think I can make this sacrifice for our relationship and not feel resentment because of it? And that will take some soul searching, each of them independently.
And Vanessa, when she came back to me to work with my dad, she was coming back to an area where she'd been married and divorced. And so there were some bad memories back here. And I ended up, for lack of a better phrase, getting my way. It's not that she didn't have some misgivings and concerns about it, but I told her, I said, this trek of mine to become a physician, and then afterward, we had talked about it as long as we'd been together, and I had talked to her about wanting to work with my dad. That had been a lifelong kind of thing, and to work in an area with people that I knew and potentially would take care of. So she knew that. But for my part, I did understand, she'd made friends in the area where I was in training. I made a lot of friends too. It was a difficult decision. And it's one that we talked at length, when I was beginning to finish and other job offers were potentially happening. The group that ran the residency program, they had spots and they wanted me to stay. And so all of that. And so, but through that process of saying, okay, this is what I want. This is my desire. This isn't something new. This is something that we've been talking about for a long time. And maybe the two that you're talking about, hopefully this isn't a new thing. They've had these desires and talked about it. I don't know.
Oh, I was sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
I was just going to say also, does this involve a dream? Like Jeep's dream was to work with his father. He had that dream for so long.
Since I was a little kid.
Yeah. And so I very willingly made that sacrifice because I knew that it was a dream of his. And I also knew, pick a backup plan, right? If we came here, if it didn't work out, we could always make that decision to leave. But yes, I did make the sacrifice to come back here because
that's
it was
a really
dream.
good point.
No,
because
outstanding.
That's a factor. I think a lot of people don't think of that. How much weight you're giving to the decisions. So when couples are making this, and man, this is tough, even in a relationship where people do have open communication, and have been married for a long time, and it comes up. If you're young and you're facing this and you're still in a little bit of that young, selfish, stage, I would say, where trying to figure things out. How often have you met couples where this comes up as like a resentment or grudge that they've been hanging on to for years, where someone gave in, so to speak? Because you're right, someone has to compromise and someone has to be the loser in the situation, so to speak. How often does it come up where it's like, well, I did that for you, 10 years ago, and they're still bitter and angry about it?
Well, you know what? I'll answer that question. But first of all, I think when you do make that decision to, for example, I use myself, when I made that decision to move with Jeep back so he could work with his dad, I made that decision and I knew in my heart and soul that I made it for him. And because I chose that I, if it didn't work out 10 years down the road, I wasn't going to continue to hit him over the head with it. So you do have a choice, but once you make that decision, you can't use it against your partner.
Yeah, you can't. You can't say, "Well, see, I let you. We did it your way. Look how it's turned out," and then beat them over the head and say,
because that doesn't.
Because there's practicalities and there's realities, and in that situation, like May said, there's not, not every single decision you make. Actually, there's always somebody that has to give more. This idea that it's like give and take and it's always equal, it's never equal. That's the point. It's never equal. But hopefully, in the grand scheme of things, the differential sacrifices average out where you feel that it's at least fair, right?
Yes. Because you would like to believe that at some point in the future, and it's happened with us, is that, okay, you want this now, and you came to bat for me. When I wanted this, you were there for me. So I'm going to be there for you now. Mm-hmm. And you would, exactly like you said, in the grand scheme of things, that it's going to even out. And because if it doesn't even out, then there's nothing fair about it. And all that's going to do is create hostility, resentment, bitterness, everything that causes walls to.
Well, that's why, you have to come back to that. And Vanessa owned the decision. So since she owned it, there's going to be, no or less resentment. But like you think of the dream. Well, what if the dream is, you married the cute kindergarten teacher and her dream was to open this daycare that makes $35,000 a year. You barely subsist. She has to work like crazy to run the business side of it as well. And you're a neurosurgeon. Guess what? In the practical world, the guy that's going to make, $750,000, probably you go where his career is the best. But at the same time, you can't be the arrogant jerk that just says, I make the most money, I decide which direction the ship goes. Because that is an incredibly unhappy life, especially when somebody is sacrificing, as you said, a dream. Like if it's a dream, money doesn't really mean that much. And so understanding kind of the emotional liabilities that are in these decisions is critically important. Because again, marriages aren't built on love. They're built on trust. How do you trust somebody? You know that they have your back.
Definitely. So, and commitment.
And you made another great point is, you go, at least initially, where, okay, we're going to go to where you have an excellent job, you're making a lot of money. I still have this desire and this dream. It's just not going to happen right now, but it will be able to happen sometime down the line. And so when we're fixed in this community, our kids are, we're settled and you're settled in your job and we're going to stay there. And something like that comes up, there should be no issue at all with something like that happening. But if you're going to stand up there and say, no, then that's just the wrong attitude about that. They're completely wrong.
Okay, well, let's hop on to a next item on the list. Of course, everybody, I think, knows that the big two strife-causing things in marriage are usually finances and sex, if I'm not wrong. So what do you want to tackle next out of those?
Yeah, I think so. We had a sex talk back 100 episodes ago or whatever.
Yeah. We'll sprinkle that at the end of the episode here or so. But so finances fits perfectly because obviously if you're making career decisions, where you're going to live, whose job takes priority, obviously finances is part of that discussion. So take it away. Like what big things other than deciding on careers happen with finance struggles?
I really believe that a big thing with finances is financial infidelity, is something we call financial infidelity, which is, well, I'm going to go buy X because
we'll give you an example.
I deserve X.
Yeah.
Instead of treating it like a team And finances are just something that you manage as a team. And we usually, we set a limit, a
Right.
dollar limit. Like,
Right.
okay, what dollar limit can I spend on something
without having to let you know about
right,
it,
without,
talk to you about it.
right. So just have guardrails in place so that, and we talk a lot about rules that we have in our relationship that form guardrails around our union, so to speak. And then we just don't ever go outside of that, because if we do, we know we're going to be trying to repair some bigger problems. Like, for example, we have rules around arguing. And so, the rules are, no third parties, no past history, no cursing.
Well, that's impossible.
No bad cursing, like calling each other names. Like
We're straying a little from the point, but
yeah.
So I'll give you an example of exactly what Vanessa's saying. Years ago, when we first moved into this house, we were decorating it, and I started looking at paintings. And at that time, Thomas Kincaid was big. He's very big, and I love his artwork. It's awesome. And so we happened to be at a mall outside of Pittsburgh, and one of his galleries was there. So we walked in, saw a painting that we liked, and I was into lighthouses at the time, and so we ended up buying one of his lighthouse pictures. And so took it home, and then I'm like, damn, I really like that. And so what do? I go online to the art gallery, and I see 2 other paintings that I wanted to buy. And I knew that if I did this, I thought, well, maybe I'm going to be able to explain myself. But in the back here, it's like the Animal House movie where there's the angel on one side and the devil on the other. And, don't you harm? And the devil's like, It was kind of like that. And unfortunately, the devil kind of got his way that time. And so I bought 2 paintings, and they showed up at the house, and she saw them there. And if looks could kill, I'd have been dead a long time ago. And I was wrong. And that was buying, I think those 2 paintings back then, they were probably, $4,000 or $5,000, I think, all together. And it just was not that
I'll never forget that amount.
it's not. Yeah, it's not. It's not that it wasn't something that we couldn't have done at the time. It's just how I did it. It was just so wrong. She may have had something, and this is where it's unfaithful, is she may have had something for the kids that she wanted to buy that I didn't know about, or she may wanted to get another car, and I took that choice away from her by doing this on my own. And so you break a trust when you do something like that. And my dad, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I mean, I could go on and on about him.
You want to know how I resolved?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I resolved that? Something I had never done.
Did you light them on fire in front of them?
No, I'm like, we are taking these back.
Oh, wow.
Simple.
Well, it wasn't.
We ended up keeping 1.
Yes.
We kept 1. Yes, we kept 1 because that was our decision to get 1. But the other 2 went back. And
you were very life-giving about that.
Yeah, I would have Lorena bobbited the situation by probably lighting them on fire.
But here's the most important question: did they go up in value in the last 25 years?
That's his negotiating tactic with everything. It will go up in value.
But they did. Like, one of them was that we ended up keeping was the Good Shepherd, which is Christ coming out of a village or of a cottage. and he's all these animals, and it sits right out here near our front door, and it's just an awesome portrait. And thankfully, you know, Vanessa elected to keep that, and really, she could have said, "I'm so mad at you. You are so wrong about this. They're all going back. I don't care if I like it or not. It's just the principle of what you did." And she didn't do that, you know, and we got to keep one. And I could have taken that and used that in the future. Okay, well, I'm going to buy 3 or 4. We're going to keep one anyway. But and just the doing that, if there's just nothing that is fair, life-giving, or thinking about what, you know, what your spouse wants.
Yeah, I had a colleague friend that
I know exactly what you're going to say.
Oh my. So, yeah, she would zip home at lunchtime quickly to check the front doorstep for package deliveries before her husband came home from work shift,
and then hide the Visa bill.
And she would also hide the Visa bill, and she paid the bill, so she's like, I gotta hide the Visa bill and hide the, you know, Pottery Barn delivery that's coming with $500 worth of stuff in boxes. And I'm like, what a way to live.
Well, strangely, they're not married anymore. But interestingly, but it's very, very fascinating, because I love what you said, that it's called financial infidelity, because any of those breaches of trust is infidelity. And it's interesting because you see marriages that do end in infidelity, but sometimes it's a two-way street. It's just one person eventually crossed the sexual line. The other person had been crossing a gazillion other lines of time infidelity, financial infidelity,
I love that.
Parental responsibility infidelity. Like, they're all infidelities. And it's really, I mean, that stuff's really, really important. The friends that I've had that have had, you know, somebody has had an affair and they've got back together, it was always because the affair happened because the marriage wasn't working. And so it was a, you know, a Band-Aid for a big problem, which then when they ripped the Band-Aid off, they were actually able to repair their marriage and have a better marriage. I think that that's possible. And then there's, of course, the people that just are untrustworthy, because there's people that are untrustworthy. That's a different story. But I love, do you have any very practical advice where you say to people, this is how you can set up your finances however you want, but there's things we've seen that probably work better than other things? Like, there's.
Go ahead.
You know what? I'm an accountant by training, have a master's in finance. And so he always deferred that to me. Like, he always got the medical questions. I always deferred to him. With finances, he always deferred to me. And it was allowing us, or it was him allowing me to influence him as far as.
It's another important thing.
Yes, like allowing your partner to influence you. Like, just because you think you're right doesn't mean that you're right. So, you know, take them into consideration and listen to the point of view and make a decision from that. But as far as finances are concerned, you know who is like the king of finances and working with couples and making decisions on all of that is Dave Ramsey. And he's really come out of, he's shot to the top. So he really has a program out there that can teach couples how to do their finances. And, you know, just as long as you're keeping it open with each other.
Well, I could tell you one thing, and we talked about this really before we were even married about the financial aspect, and that is having a joint account. Mm-hmm. I have just seen when people have separate accounts, especially if there's no accounting, what's going into each account. That's an issue in itself, right there. And when we've talked to people, it's one of the things that we ask about. And sometimes he pays his part of the bills, I pay my part of the bills. And questions have been asked, okay, so do you each know what's going into each other's account? do you know that?
It just would get complicated, and it doesn't need to be
I think
complicated.
it's a fundamental issue of trust. It's like, you're going to trust me to give myself wholeheartedly to you sexually, but I don't know how much money you have. I'd call bullshit on that one in about 2 seconds. Like, it doesn't,
But it's out there.
I think it's also an outgrowth of living together before you're married, because you are not financially encumbered with a roommate necessarily, or at least you're not financially encumbered to the same degree. And so, we've seen this, in our own family. It's like, well, I can't tell them how to spend money because we're not married. We don't really share these accounts legally. If I leave or he leaves, nothing happens. And so you sit there and you kind of go, you're training yourself in some of these pretend marriages to just be pretend married. When a huge point of trust, like I remember going to church and it's like, go in my garage and it'll tell you what you really believe. And when I have to suck my gut in to walk between the toys, that tells you that I believe that those things give me life. Whether they do or not is a different argument. And so this concept of money is a huge, huge deal to me, because, if you can't run your family like a business, so all of the money goes into the business, each partner takes a certain amount of discretionary income that they can do whatever they want to with, the rest gets, parceled out to, for your kids, for your investments, for, short and long-term save, like all these real simple Dave Ramsey things, then do you really trust the other person? Like I would find it impossible to trust the other person if they had their own cash stash. Like that just seems like that would be a total deal breaker for me.
But like May said, Tim, it's out. You'd be surprised at people out there that do it that way, and then later on, they'll find out by accident that this was going on, and some of that money that was going in there was used to buy something else that didn't even know about, or to be unfaithful, having this or that. And it's so it just should not happen.
I just thought of something that popped in my head, and I agree with you. What about, because there's so many times this happens, someone dies or some crisis happens and boom, all of a sudden there's all this debt because someone's taken out all these credit cards and they're maxed to the hilt because the partner did not know about it. So is that, that seems like an obvious, but maybe we should talk about it, that it's just like spending. If you go and want to go to J.C. Penney's or Macy's or, I don't know, the automotive shop and open up a credit card with them, you should be asking first, preferably, or telling your spouse that you're doing this.
Yeah, we always do that. And I think it's also good to have, for lack of a better word, meetings periodically, like let's go over our state of the union, the financial state of the union. And it involves discussions to talk about, okay, how much are we going to be putting in retirement? What do we want our retirement to look like?
Rainy day fund.
Yeah, you have to make decisions along those, along the way. And if you're making decisions along the way, they should be decisions that both of you are making
I guess
together.
To that point, it sounds weird to think about when you're first getting married, or even when you're first 5 years, but you almost need to do and our financial planner had us do it. And it's the short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. You should be doing that all the time and revising it. But how much money do you think you might want to retire? If you don't know how much money, what do you want your lifestyle to look at like when you're 70? If you can imagine it in your 20s, but do you want it? You want to just live in a little place, or you want the big retirement home, or think about that now, because it affects your day-to-day stuff.
Yes. Yeah. You're so right. And, when you're young and you think you've got, so to speak, you've got the world by the balls, and you don't need to think about that stuff, that's really when you do need to think about that. We got married. I was still in my residency, and we started talking to a financial planner, got disability policies, whole life, stuff like that. We started doing
But that's
that
because
right
you're married
away.
to a finance person. If you are two bozos like us,
Well,
who just got to 40 something and went, how do we know if we have enough money?
We weren't total bozos. we had done the big things right. We had the correct insurance. We had we were, we could have contributed a little bit more aggressively early, but we contributed early. The key is
you didn't think about it.
The thing that's interesting is that whole concept of saving for retirement. Okay, well, I'm never going to retire because I love my job. Yeah, right. Okay, you're not going to love it forever. Guess what? Trust me, I'm a doctor. But there's a point where, I mean, the saving for retirement is way more important at the beginning of your career than at the end. At the end, it doesn't matter. Like, we talked to our financial advisor now, and it's like, I got a job and they're going to pay me some, it's got pretty good benefits and it's got a decent 401k and all this kind of stuff. And he goes, yeah, well, it doesn't really matter because you're only going to work for 2 or 3 more years. So who cares? It'll help a little bit, but it's not a big deal. Whereas if you're not putting that money away, I mean, our son started when he was 18 because he's like, when this compounds, it's unbelievable how powerful it is in 40 years. I mean, you're 58 in 40 years if you start when you're 18.
So we did a show and with a couple episodes with financial planning with Daniel Wren. But would you ever counsel a marriage in premarital counseling or early on for people to just go to a financial planner right away and just like whether to just think about these things, make them aware of things that they wouldn't even know to think about or to start discussing and planning for now? Yeah.
Yeah, and I would plant questions in their mind. Like, have you thought of this? Have you thought of checking accounts? Have you thought of savings accounts? Do you know what a retirement account is? You know the difference between an IRA and a 401k? Learning that language, and there are so many people that hate it because they don't understand it. One of our daughters, for one, just doesn't understand it, and it's so important that I say you just can't leave that stuff up to someone. You have to manage it yourself as well, because I mean it's your money, right?
What if you have 2 people? Because usually one is going to be more inclined to do the bills and etc. But what if both people just can't stand it? I mean, is there an easy way to say how to delegate that? Take turns, hire it out? Like, what would you say?
You know what? It's so much easier now because of being able to schedule bill paying, and I'm one of those that I don't like to be late on anything. So I schedule everything, and I guesstimate how much it's going to be. And then at the end of the year, I've got credits in all the utilities and the water and the electric, and I've got credits, because I look at it from an annual point of view and say, okay, we spent, say, $1,000 last year. I'm going to budget $1,100 this year. I'm going to divide it by 12, and that's what I'm going to pay, and do it from that point of view. And it's on auto.
And there's so many classes. You're right. Classes, online things, tips, tricks, budgeting tools and apps, and
no, I love.
There's no excuse now.
I love. So we did property development, which is okay. So there's lots of things in my life that I want to do once. Building a custom home, I want to do once. Property development, I never wanted to do, but I've done it once. And dying. So, it's amazing. We would have these contractors come out. They'd have to do surveys and they'd build roads and all this kind of stuff. So this engineering company did a bunch of work for us, and they were really great. And I actually knew the gal that ran the front office, and we drive into town and drop off the check, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And it's like, "Well, I want to pay my bill." May's like, "I want to pay my bill," and she goes, "I don't even know if I have it prepared yet." And he's like, "What do you mean?" And so she tells us, she goes, "Yeah, like we're doing $150,000, $200,000 jobs, and they pay at day 89 because day 90 they're delinquent." And she's like, "Yeah, every contractor, that's what they do." And I'm like, "How is that possible? How do you live like that?"
It's like, for instance, what Vanessa does. And we talk about our finances frequently, but there'll be some months where she'll say, I know you want this or that. Be careful this month. She'll say, the credit cards are a little higher because you have some static expenses, but you have other things that change. And when you have kids, one that's in law school, one that's in college, they have static expenses, but there's also some dynamic things that you have to work in that they have to be a part of and aren't always on board with.
You're not using the proper accounting language there.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. but people know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, your fixed expenses are your fixed.
And your
every
variable.
single month. They're coming. Yes. They're coming through the door.
And so you tell me you need to lay off this month, and I'm like, okay, all right, I'll be careful. And those are the kind of talks that you need to have regularly.
Like September's huge with law school books and college books. Like August, September.
Right.
Killer months for
kids.
books.
Back to school, clothes, uniforms, sign up things, sports, any age of kid. It's killer. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so just look at your previous year and just kind of get a picture of, okay, this is what we spent this previous year. Chances are we're going to spend about the same for these fixed and the variable expenses like kids. And then just have a look at that and plan and put a plan together. Look at it. Well, yes. I'm always looking at it, but...
But like you said, May, there's no reason with all of the tools that are out there now to not be able to do things satisfactorily with your finances. There really isn't. It depends on whether it's a priority for you to do it.
Well, that's a great point. It really needs to be a priority because the last thing you want happening is, you're a few years from retirement and you realize that you can't.
That's devastating.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, I remember one of my former colleagues, and he was going to this men's group. This is 20 some years ago, and he's like, dude, I'm sitting around the campfire with guys that are 64 years old that have $3,000 in retirement, and you're just awful? So what are they going to do? I mean, you're living on Social Security, which is
his dad. Perfect example. Perfect example. He was a radiologist for how many years?
Well, he initially. That's a long story. He was a family practitioner, and then he did a residency in radiology, but didn't pass his boards, and so then he did radiology for a while, not board certified. But then he went back to doing family practice, but just was the most horrendous finance part. Just made so many bad mistakes, and here he is with literally
sad,
nothing
sad
to his name. It's sad. And you want to talk about something that scares you into saying, I'm not going to let that happen to me.
Well,
And so
what's the statistic? If you can average 8% over 40 years and it's $500 a month, it's $1 million. There's essentially no excuse for anyone with a real income to not be able to save that kind of money. The issue that we're seeing with some of our employees and the young kids that are around us, our kids' friends and whatnot, is that the entry market into the housing market is so unbelievably expensive that they're forced to rent. So now their rent is 15 or 20% higher than what a mortgage would be, but they can never get ahead enough to get a down payment. So they're basically burning all of this potential extra revenue that they'd have that they could do in long-term savings and actually retire fairly comfortably, even with modest incomes. I mean, it's the bullshit tax that inflation is. Money printing and all the money printing we did during COVID, which we accelerated, fiscal policy by we cranked up the money supply by 5 times. Yeah. I mean, literally looking at my retirement savings and the fact that we're right on the brink of retirement, that scares the living hell out of me because I have zero control over that.
Right.
Definitely.
So, but at the beginning of your time together, we all go through times where you live in an apartment, right. You rent in a town, and unfortunately with kids now, sometimes they have to stay in that predicament or situation for a longer period of time. But to do it right, you really have to do that. My nephew, there's another guy. I mean, he had close to $350,000 in loans from medical school, and didn't start making any significant money until he started his residency. But
which isn't significant.
And that's not money that you can moonlight away.
Yeah.
Like when I moonlighted like crazy when I was a resident, second and third year. Because in where I'm at, you
right.
needed to have 1 year in order to get a license. And so I moonlighted like crazy and oftentimes made more than I was getting paid as a resident. And all that money went to paying off loans and, things like that. Well, you can't do that now because of the expense of education. So they're up against that. But what he's done is he has had this goal. His wife, they were engaged for a long time and together for a long time, but they have lived a pretty
frugal.
Yeah, that's a good word. And knowing that eventually that it's not going to always be this way, but it's one of those things, a smart thing that my dad did talk to me about, and that was delayed reward. And especially for those of us that are in the medical field and know the years that we spend in studying and training and loans and all that stuff, that's something that has to be kept in mind. Because if you don't, and we know enough of us they had delayed reward, but they spent too much in between as well.
And the delayed reward is him choosing, like, I'm knocking these loans out in 5 years.
You're right. That's what he's doing.
I'm not going to be halfway through my career still paying loans. I know some folks that went to medical school with Jeep that were still paying off loans.
30, almost 30 years later.
Yeah, I think there is a balance because, I always kind of mock Dave Ramsey as practical as he is. It's like live like no one else so you can live like no one else so that you can be 80 and not be able to do a damn thing, but you'll be debt free. And so, with a big nest egg. No, so there's a point, there's kind of a balance point though, because, and we've talked about this with when we've done other finance shows, this, FIRE thing, the financial independence, retire early. I think the financial independence part is great. The retire early, I chafe a bit against, especially in medicine, because our skill set is very, very narrow and very specialized. So if you go to business school, and you've worked in business for 15 or 20 years and you retire early, you can go back to business. No one cares. They don't care that you haven't done business education or whatever. They care about your past resume and whether you can perform. You're not doing neurosurgery and then not doing it for 15 years and ever doing it again. That's never happening. You're not getting even like an urgent care job as a neurosurgeon who went back and did a little bit of family practice training. Like it's done. It's a very perishable skill that we have as physicians. And these guys that retire at 45, I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Like, you better have a gigantic grip of cash because there's all sorts of financial calamities that you have no control over. And I'm like,
they're retiring to something else. They're rewiring. That's what I'm doing.
That's fine if you do that. But a lot of them are like, it's just like, I'm taking this vacation and this vacation.
Anyway.
Well, and I wanted to spend more time with my kids. And I'm like, what are you teaching your kids? Honestly. Okay. If the right way to parent is that you have both parents home all the time, 100% of the time. Where, in what universe in the world is that a normal thing? Like, that is the most, I mean, we used to, in North America, we had grandparents help raise our children so that mother could pull the plow.
Right.
So, this idea of, mothers staying at home, That's a luxury. That happened in the 50s. It didn't happen before that. Everyone worked, or else you all died.
Yeah. And
So
I'm just thinking that's another obviously topic. Thinking of the marital thing is who's going to stay home if you have children? You need to talk about that.
Yeah.
Is it both of you taking turns, one person, the other? Obviously, that's, I think, something that most people are aware of that now, having that discussion because it's more out there. I don't know. I could be totally wrong.
Well, and I think another thing to discuss in this whole, especially premarital thing, and keep coming back to it, is you don't get to have it all. You don't get to have two people at the absolute pinnacle of their career with 4 kids without, having someone else raise your kids.
Unless you're both plastic surgeons.
Well, but it just doesn't.
You can buy all the help.
Yeah, but then you're not raising your kids. Why are you having your kids if you're not raising your kids? Like there's, are you the royal freaking family where like nannies raise them and the corgis poop all over the place?
Yeah, and that just goes back to, what do you really want? What does your life look like? If it's going to be a 2-physician household, are you going to have children, and what is that going to look like? And I think those decisions need to be made prior to.
And I've said this on your guys' show before, and that is, when we talk to couples, when you're in the twilight of your life, when you're looking back on your life, and let's face it, we're all going to have regrets about things. You try to minimize them as much as possible, but when you're at that age, are you going to look back on your life, and are you going to be worried that you didn't drive X car, or that you didn't have X job, or that? No, you're going to regret about the time that you didn't have, the time with your family, with your wife, with your friends that you could have had, didn't have, because of your materialistic desires that could have been less. But at some point it gets out of control, and you just always have to have that in the back of your mind, because if it's not there, you just live in regret, and nobody wants to be that
really
way.
Good point.
Nobody.
Really good point.
Here's our son now texting me for money.
I love it.
So there you go.
Mine's due. It's not quite the end of the month. Maybe tomorrow. No, getting close.
No, it's funny because it's like they talk about how much it costs to raise children. Oh, it costs however much to raise a child to 18. I'm like, yeah, no. After 18, they get way more expensive.
Absolutely.
Oh, it's like 26, 28.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're not flying. Well, yeah, 26 when they can go off of insurance. But
what a day of rejoicing!
Like, add another decade to having your kid still nursing off of you,
sucking all the lifeblood and literally out of you.
Yes.
I know we're kind of running out of time, but the thing that's sort of a big thing for us, and Tim, talked about, what was I going to say? Recreation and spending free time. And obviously people are attracted to each other for a reason, not hopefully just friends with the benefits of sex, like a roommate with there's hobbies, things you like to do together, which with time can change. How do you counsel couples to find things, interests together, apart? We have our own thoughts on it's important to have things outside as well as together, but any tips and thoughts on that?
Yeah. I'll give you, for instance, there are some things that Vanessa's passionate about, and there's some things that I'm passionate about. And a big thing that I'm passionate about is
lighthouses. Lighthouses.
What's that? Yeah, you see it. Yeah.
No lighthouses.
No, not. But it's. I'm a Pittsburgh sports fan, so I love mostly baseball, but I like football and hockey, and so I go up. She could care less about maybe hockey sometimes, but any of this. But because she knows that I love to go, I'd like to be present in, especially exciting moments. She'll go with me. Like, one of the things that I always wanted to do was go to a baseball park that, an old one, like Wrigley Field. And we were in Chicago. I was at a convention at the airport, and it was really important for me to be able to go to the ballpark because I didn't know when or if we were going to be in Chicago again. And she went down there. I'm like, I'm in this ballpark. I'm sitting there. I'm knowing the people that have played here, and I'm spooging. I'm just like, I'm like, and she's sitting there looking at magazines and
this
stuff.
This was before iPhones,
right?
Yeah.
And she's looking, and I'm thinking, she did this for me, and so she's got things that that I'm a part of too, and so it's not that you have to do that all the time, and you can have things that you each like to do. Like, I like to bowl, or did for a long time, and she would let me do that, and she likes to do things on herself with her friends. And
what about having something you do together, like specifically,
both,
like
yeah. Travel's huge.
Travel's huge for us.
It's always been a hot button for us, even before we were married. And I think it's one of the things that really drew us together is that, we have always liked going different places, and we've had the ability, have been privileged and blessed to be able to travel to many places outside of this country. The Holy Land is the one that comes up to me, that comes to mind.
So couples should, I think it's important to have at least one activity of some sorts that you do together that you have in common. Otherwise, it's one thing to say, well, I'll support your, sports games and show up, or I'll go to your craft fair, whatever. I don't know what it is, but yet you're still not completely present. If that makes sense, you're there supporting them, but you're there for them, and you're not engaged. Where if it's something together that you both can enjoy, then you're fully more present, and I think it changes the experience. So my opinion is, I think even if you just can find one thing, I don't know, playing Scrabble together, or a murder mystery on TV, or a show, or you're right, traveling together where you're experiencing the sights, etc. But I think there needs to be that's my opinion.
But I think it's super duper powerful to have sort of no-go zones. Like, May will never, she doesn't ever have to come to Sturgis, because that's everything she hates. And it's everything that I just find
you're
so
afraid what I would do in Sturgis.
Find so recreationally, recharging. So I don't really care about that. I mean, it'd be cool for her to see it once, but whatever, that's all it would be. But it's also unbelievably fun to get into some stuff that she's into that I was never into. Like, I find it really, uplifting. The problem is then I get into it more than she does, and it's like I stole her thing.
Yes.
So I actually have to be careful about doing that.
Well, one of the things that you would hope that draws you together while you're dating and engaged is you find these things that you like to do together, and it's part of the thing that draws you together. I would hate to think that you only get married, for instance, if you like this or like that, and it's you're interested in what they're doing, but you're not really bowled over by it. I mean, like I said, we were drawn because of our like of going to different places, of traveling, of going to concerts, to see people that we both like. And those are things that, yes, they change as your relationship matures and according to different things that happen throughout your married life. But you have those basic things that draw you together. So hopefully that occurs before you put a ring on each other's finger.
And I think we go back to balance, right?
Yeah.
even though you're married, you cannot forget that you are an individual person as well. You cannot lose your individuality. And your partner needs to get behind that as well and know that's important.
You give some of that up.
Yeah.
You have to
Right.
come together.
Right.
But
it's a balance again.
But you're individual people.
Right. Well,
Right.
I didn't want to marry
Right.
myself. I mean, that's the point. And
Yeah.
you know, I find it just almost creepy when there's people that only do stuff together. Like, I don't think that's a sign of maturity. I think it's probably a sign of being
Right.
scared
We see
shitless that they're going to do something untoward or something like that. And it's just, you know, there's this insecurity that I see in a lot of couples where like they just have to do every interest, every single thing, and I'm like, well, that's just that's not interesting. Like, I love it when May goes, she'll have to take a vacation to Hawaii by herself and, you know, or take, you know, our daughter or one of her friends, and she comes back, she's refreshed, she has completely different experiences than I have. And I'm like, I might just be here working. That's perfectly fine. I like that. I get what it means to her, and I get what it means to her to be there without me. That actually can be a better experience at times. It's just like, if, you know, the crew I go to Sturgis with, if we brought our wives, it would be a living hell.
It would be the King of the Hill episode.
Well, yeah, it'd be just the dumbest thing ever, because it's you know, it's cosplay for doctors and lawyers. That's what it is. Okay, so just give me my cosplay convention.
All right.
all right.
And I don't know. Any last thoughts on how do you even negotiate in-laws? I mean,
Oh boy.
Oh dear God.
Well, for one thing, like I said earlier in our talk, understand that you're not only marrying your spouse, but you're marrying their family, especially the in-laws. And that has to be something that you realize going in, because if you don't.
Do you ever see big surprises where, you know, say someone's been dating and just because of logistics of where they're living, they don't see their family a whole lot? Say, for instance, med school is a good example because you're stuck in internship residency. You're so busy, you don't even have time for a vacation. And then, oh, this seems good. Yeah, you know, we FaceTime with their parents, but they're far away. Well, the next thing you know, you're living your life 5-10 years later, all of a sudden the family's meddling. They're in there more than you want. You're dealing with all these problems and issues where it's kind of a big surprise, I guess. Do you see that happen? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think when that does happen, I mean, it's happened with us. Well, not only when we first got married, boundaries.
I was just going to say boundaries.
Boundaries are huge and that needs to, like you're talking about, May. We've seen it happen. It's not. Usually you start to see these things earlier. I mean, as in-laws get older and some things happen that you may not expect, but you can kind of get a feel for how they are. There's not going to be this drastic change unless they become demented or unless there's some other medical thing that happens. You know what their character is, what their personality's like. And so it's not a big change. But, you know, when we first got together, you know, my dad had this idea of how he and I were going to practice together. And this was back at a time when computers were starting, and he wanted to have none of it. And he had all this idea of me doing so much more of the work and getting paid less. And Vanessa and I had decided during residency that she was going to run the office. He never really, in particular, had an office manager, which is one of the reasons why he's in the state that he's in. But you have to only allow your in-laws so much influence in your relationship and with your kids. Because if you don't, you're going to be chasing your tail.
Yeah, and I think
constantly.
you're right. The writing's usually pretty much on the wall. You know, if like I've seen it where the male has this really strong bond to his mother, and it's just interfering with his wife because he's trying to get his needs met from going back to mommy instead of his wife. Or it can be the same thing, the female and her mom, like this, and the grandma. We've seen that before, where the women are all this tight knit thing. They just cluster together like hens, and it doesn't involve the spouse.
And then they pack the living shit out of the roosters.
Yeah. Right. Or you have your family has this unusual dependence on you, which they did with me because I was the oldest.
Right.
To do everything.
Run the family business. Yes, you're going to run the family business, and then you're dragged into that. Right.
And if you don't, like I said, and for everybody who's listening, these boundaries have to start sooner or later, because you're going to talk about something that's going to be a bone of contention between the two of you. It's huge. The longer it's allowed to persist, and it's happening now with myself and my dad, and she and her mom. These are issues that constantly we talk about, and you each, you're their child, you love them, but there's also your spouse that's involved, your kids that are involved. So many of these things, and you have to communicate about it. You just can't throw it under the rug because it doesn't get any better. It doesn't.
No, and then there's what we talked about earlier before we started recording. Then there's the aging parent thing, and how do you deal with that? And there's so many things. So we could do a whole other episode on that, but I know you guys are busy, and so I think we should wrap it up here and leave more for discussion in another episode and let you get to your things. But really good points, lots of pearls in there, and like I said, we could certainly pick it up just right where we left off and keep going. But for now, we are so happy that you're here on this episode. Thank you. Hey, why don't you quickly let everybody know how they can get a hold of you if they want to continue the discussion and help with you, and where they can go for that.
So you can find us on our website, bestfriendsagain.com, and sign up for our, we have a communication tool on there right now. So go ahead and sign up for that. It'll get you into our email list. So then, as we publish things, we release it, and then you will be aware.
We've got an event coming up in Chicago at the end of next month. It's at the Women in Medicine Summit. We're going to be doing a breakout. We're going to be doing a breakout session, and the following day we're going to be doing some coaching sessions as well.
Perfect.
So
looking forward
to anybody that's listening that's going to be there. Look
and
out
are all
for
your
us.
social links on your website as well? Okay, so we can direct people there. We'll link it in the show notes with all your
mostly on LinkedIn, but we're also on Instagram and on Facebook as well, but LinkedIn mostly.
And your book, a link to your book is on there as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's Forever For? A Physician's Guide to Everlasting Love and Success in Marriage.
We will put that in as our book of the week too on our newsletter, and link it in for you guys. It's a great read at any point in your marriage. I mean, I loved it when I read through that, and that was last year. So we will definitely link that for you. Now, a final word from our sponsor. At Pearson Ravitz, they understand that life can change in an instant. It's hard to imagine that a sudden illness, injury, or catastrophic event could put you and your family in a devastating financial situation. Physician-founded and physician-focused, Pearson Ravitz builds human connections before they create quotes. Visit www.pearsonravitz.com today and embark on a journey of safeguarding your future.
It's no secret that medicine is a bit uptight.
That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD, to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
While we try to keep BS Free MD as raw and real as possible, we can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc@bsfreemd.com.